Welcome aboard. We would begin with the first year law students exam, June 2020, question number 1. As with all essay questions, let's begin with the call of the question. Okay, with call number 1 says, what claim or claims can Penny reasonably raise against Mel? What arguments can Mel reasonably make? And what is the likely outcome? Discuss. 2, what claim or claims can Penny reasonably raise against Otto? What arguments can Otto reasonably make, and what is the likely outcome? Discuss. Number 3, what claim or claims can Penny reasonably raise against Nigel? What arguments can Nigel reasonably make, and what is the likely outcome? Discuss. Okay, under number 1, we're going to say Penny v. Mel. 2, we're going to say Penny v. Otto. 3, Penny v. Nigel. Okay, and we don't know yet, but they're kind of giving us a clue that this could possibly be torts, but we don't know yet. How do I know? It's the word claim or claims. It's definitely not crimes. Therefore, it's either torts or contract law. So let's read our facts. Mel was late for an important meeting with his supervisor one evening and was driving at least 35 miles an hour on a residential road. The posted speed limit on this road was 30 miles per hour. As Mel rounded a curve in the road, Nigel suddenly backed out of his driveway in front of Mel. Mel's headlights were on, and his lights would have been visible if a driver had looked carefully. To avoid hitting Nigel's car, Mel both braked hard and turned into the center of the street, crossing a yellow no passing line and partially entering the lane of oncoming traffic. Even if he had been going substantially slower, he would have had to take these actions to avoid hitting Nigel. Otto was driving towards Mel while adjusting his car radio. As a result, Otto did not see Mel in time. Had he been attentive, he likely could have avoided an accident. Instead, the two cars collided, left the road, and plowed into Penny, who was walking on the sidewalk. Nigel's car was not touched. Penny was seriously injured. Okay, we now have a big picture perspective, what I like to call movie mode. We know what happened. Now let's go back through we should first find our area of law. I think you've already made up the determination correctly that this is indeed tort law, and as tort law we need to put down our shopping list so that when we go back and issue spot, we're able to issue spot effectively. So we have intentional torts, negligence. We're dealing with strict liability, products liability, vicarious liability. Excuse me. Let's see that, and let's see over here. There it is. Okay. Okay. So copy and paste these into each one of our areas. Excuse me, I cut that. Okay, there we go. Right here, into here. Okay. And underneath there. Okay. Okay, great. Now, coming up here now, we're going to start out with Penny v. Mel. So let's look into the facts concerning Mel. Mel was late for an important meeting with his supervisor one evening and was driving at least 35 miles an hour on a residential road. The posted speed limit sign on this road was 30 miles per hour. Right here now we can see that there's definitely a negligence claim. So let's come down here and put that in our outline. Okay, and then we want to make sure to finish reading there. As Mel rounded a curve in the road, Nigel suddenly backed out of his driveway in front of Mel. Mel's headlights were on, and his lights would have been visible if a driver had looked carefully. To avoid hitting Nigel, Mel both braked hard and turned into the center of the street, crossing a yellow, no trespassing line and partially entering the lane of oncoming traffic. Okay, even if he had been going substantially slower, he would have had to take these actions to avoid hitting Nigel. So at this point, we can pretty much start our discussion concerning Mel. We don't have strict liability, no products in this situation, not necessarily any vicarious liability, no miscellaneous. No misrepresentation, nuisance, anything like that. We don't have any defamations, no invasion of privacy. We don't have any real big remedies issues here. We just have just our ordinary negligence claim. Let's bring that out now. Negligence, duty, standard of care. First, let's do something here. Get in the habit of doing this. Negligence, duty, standard of care, breach of duty, actual cause, proximate cause, damages, and defenses. And in terms of defenses, we want to slide in contributory negligence, last clear chance, comparative negligence, assumption of the risk. Now, we probably want to copy and paste this for each one of the other parties as well, so let's just do that. Because after, I'm just going to come up here real quick, after a quick read through, Otto was driving towards Mel while adjusting his car radio. As a result, Otto did not see Mel in time. Had he been attentive, he likely would have avoided an accident. Instead, the two cars collided, left the road, plowed into Penny, who was walking on the sidewalk. Nigel's car was not touched. Penny was seriously injured. So it doesn't look like Otto has committed anything more than a negligence as well. So we want to make sure that we paste this in for to save our time for Otto, and then coming down here for Nigel as well. Okay, excellent. Okay, great. Now, coming back up here though to Mel, we want to make sure to pay close attention now to that first paragraph dealing with going 35 and a 30. That's going to deal with breach of duty under negligence per se. Now, don't forget too, when we're dealing with duty, we have that zone of danger, which is the make sure that we're going to talk about that versus the Andrews position. This is most likely going to be zone of danger. The standard of care is a reasonably prudent driver. Okay. They're perfect. Okay, breach of duty, we talked about that. Want to make sure to throw in learned hand, formula, which is the B is less than P times L. The burden to have acted differently is less than the probability of harm times the liability of harm. Okay, and okay, now on our negligence per se now though, how do I know we dealt with the negligence per se issue here? We're dealing with a safety statute right here. Right here. This is where it's the 35 miles per hour going in a 30 mile per hour zone. Remember, we're asking ourselves here, who was injured? Was Nigel injured? Well, Nigel was the one that was backing out. Down here we have Penny, who was seriously injured. So we ask ourselves here, was Penny in the class of parties protected by by the particular statute? Okay, so we want to make sure to talk about legislative intent, class of persons protected. Is this the type of harm prevented? And was there any excuse? This is the aspect up here that was talked about for late for an important meeting. So he's going 5 miles per hour over the speed limit because he's late for an important meeting. Not a good excuse. Okay. Okay. So now we've gone through negligence per se now. But there's going to be a problem with our class of persons protected because it's going to look like the supposed speed limit sign is supposed to protect fellow motorists. Well, Penny is a pedestrian. If it could be argued that Penny is a foreseeable party affected by traveling over the speed limit, essentially because we're dealing with a residential road rather than just like a highway of sorts, it could be argued that Penny would fit that protected class. So if you can't find that, you can always fall back on the learned hand formula for finding a breach of the duty. So we've talked about this now. Make sure to highlight this. Okay. Now, as Mel rounded a curve in the road, Nigel suddenly backed out of his driveway in front of Mel. And you also want to ask yourself here, as we're going through our template, in the actual cause sense, but for what are we talking about for the but for test? But for the actions of Mel doing what? And that's what I wanted to go into our paragraph here. As Mel was rounding a curve in the road, Nigel suddenly backed out of his driveway in front of Mel. Mel's headlights were on. This indicates too that we're not just dealing with daytime driving. We're probably dealing with nighttime driving or evening driving. And his lights would have been visible if a driver had looked carefully. To avoid hitting Nigel's car, Mel both braked hard and turned into the center of the street, crossing a yellow no passing line and partially entering the lane of oncoming traffic. Even if he had been going substantially slower, he would have had to take these actions to avoid hitting Nigel. So we're going to argue here underneath not but for test, but not only foreseeability, but whether or not this intervening event, and what would be that intervening event? Nigel backing out of his driveway. And what we're going to ask ourselves here: is this an unforeseen, superseding, intervening event? Presumably. But here's the thing. Though you could argue that it's not too. So remember though, up here under the facts say that even if he had been going substantially slower, so it wasn't the speed that caused him to brake, he would have had to take these course of actions to avoid hitting Nigel. So that's what Mel's going to argue, is that it wasn't just his traveling over the speed limit, having to brake hard around the corner, but he was having to brake due to Nigel backing up that caused Mel to enter the oncoming lane of traffic, which ultimately ended in injuring Penny. That's an argument you want to put in there. Now, damages, we're dealing with actual damages in the form of Penny being seriously injured. Don't forget to throw in general damages and special damages, okay? General damages being things like pain and suffering, loss of the ability to enjoy life. Special damage would be more like lost wages, lost future earnings, medical expenses, out-of-pocket expenses, and the like. Now, down here under the contributory negligence, the argument could be raised by Mel that Penny was contributed to her own injury by not properly wearing more visible uniform when she was walking on the in the residential area. But that's still it still does not say that she knew, if she hadn't, that she would get hit by Mel. So that's that aspect concerning contributory negligence. And it's also, remember, it's under the common law. It's a bar to complete recovery. So we got to make sure that that even if Mel is successfully able to argue that, remember, Penny's going to say the last clear chance that it was Mel having to brake for Nigel. That was the last clear chance to avoid the accident in the first place. Now, comparative negligence. Now, even after all this is talked about and analyzed, the comparative negligence would say that even if Penny is at all at fault for her injury, that would only reduce her recovery by her apportioned degree of fault. Now, down here under assumption of the risk, we're going to ask ourselves here: has Penny assumed a risk, and was she aware of a risk in walking at the time she did, and where she was walking, and did she voluntarily assume such risk regardless of the outcome? And that would be the argument that Mel would make against Penny. We want to make sure to throw in a conclusion here as well. Okay, and now down here under Penny v. Auto, that we're going to ask ourselves here under Auto. Now come up here and we'll talk about some Auto facts right here. Right, now remember, this is Nigel facts right here. Otto was driving towards Mel while adjusting his radio. So remember, adjusting his radio is paying more attention to the radio than it is to into paying attention to for driving. Now the thing that we got to first ask ourselves here though was Penny within the zone of danger created by Otto's conduct? Absolutely. Why? The Otto's car came in contact with Penny. How do we know that? Otto did not see Mel in time. Had he been attentive, he likely could have avoided an accident. Very important fact there. Instead, the two cars, what two cars? Mel's car and Otto's car collided, left the road, and plowed into Penny. So we know that Penny was in the zone of danger created by Otto's conduct. So there was a duty owed to Penny and a duty of reasonable care. And what type of standard of care are we going to ask here? Absolutely, the reasonably prudent driver standard of care. Also now, how was there a breach of a duty underneath Otto? So I'm just going to come down here and grab this. So we got reasonable, prudent driver. Okay. Reasonably, there we go. Reasonably prudent driver. Now, breach of duty. Do we have a negligence per se issue here? No. Do we have res ipsa? Do we know the cause? No. No. We have a learned in hand formula here. Absolutely. And we want to make sure to throw in B is P times L. B is less than P times L. There we go. And down actual cause, we know we're going to have but for. But remember here as well, and this is what I also don't want to forget too, on the but for test, we're going to come up here and grab for Mel too. This reminded me to put this up here. But for test and substantial factor. Okay. Okay, now down here also we're going to throw in a substantial factor. Oh, yeah, factor test. Okay, proximate cause, make sure to throw in foreseeability, intervening events. Okay, down here underneath damages, we want to make sure we throw in special damages. So let's see, we'll come in here. There we go. Oh, there we go. Special damages, general damages. Okay, excellent. The defenses. Now, Otto might claim almost the same kind of arguments that Mel argued against Penny, that she might have contributed to her own injury, the contributory negligence argument. But Penny is going to argue that had Otto been paying attention, Otto had the last clear chance to avoid the accident in the first place, and Otto did not take the proper course of action. Comparative negligence, even if Penny's found to be at any degree of fault, that would only reduce her amount of recovery. Was Penny aware of a risk? Did she voluntarily assume that risk regardless of the outcome? It does not look like that here. So we're going to throw in a conclusion that she may bring a claim against Otto for negligence. Okay. Now down here, we're going to probably copy and paste this again, so we're saving ourselves time when we get down to the that last like 15 minutes of our writing. We want to make sure that we're writing efficiently and being able to finish our essay. So even though I'm copying and pasting this twice, it'll save us time in the long run. There we go. Now, negligence. We're dealing with Nigel here. Coming up and grabbing our Nigel facts. Thank you very much. Right here. As Mel rounded a curve in the road, we crossed these facts before. Nigel suddenly backed out of his driveway in front of Mel. Oh, yes. Mel's headlights were on, and his lights would have been visible if a driver had looked carefully, which indicates maybe just maybe that Nigel was not looking carefully when he was backing up. Now, to avoid hitting Nigel's car, Mel had both braked hard and turned into the center of the street, crossing a yellow, no passing line, and partially entered the lane of oncoming traffic. Even if he had been driving substantially slower, he would have had to take these actions to avoid hitting Nigel. So now let's come down here to Nigel facts. Let's talk about this now. Was Penny within the zone of danger created by Nigel? Or sorry, excuse me. Let me come up here. Oh, you know what? Let me make sure I didn't get. Okay, number 1, number 2. Oh yeah, number 2. Okay, and then number 3 down here under Nigel. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. Okay, now. Was Penny within the zone of danger created by Nigel's conduct? Okay, Yes, because it was Nigel's backing out that caused Mel to brake in the first place, cross the lane of traffic, and ultimately collide with Otto, which then resulted in plowing into Penny. Now, what standard of care then was owed to Penny by Nigel to act as a reasonably prudent driver would act in the same or similar circumstance? Did Nigel uphold that standard of care? It doesn't look like that here because it's burden to have acted differently, which means paying more attention to backing up and observing car lights during that particular time of day, maybe in the evening, would have been of utmost importance here. But Nigel did not do that. The facts say that he a reasonable driver would have seen that. Okay, would have seen the Mel's headlights. Now, of course, the probability of harm if someone does not see the headlights on at that time of night, and the fact that we're dealing with a car here times the severity of someone getting hit by a car, which Penny did, definitely outweighs the burden to have acted differently, which means that in fact Nigel did breach his duty of care owed to Penny. Remember we tried to talk here but for test, but for the actions of Nigel, Penny would not have been injured. How she was injured. Substantial factor test. Substantial factor is saying that the substantial factor of Nigel backing out, Mel having to brake hard, going over the into oncoming traffic, and hitting Otto, plowing into Otto, and colliding with Otto, and ultimately plowing into Penny were all substantial factors and leading to the injury of Penny. Proximate cause: was it foreseeable that not paying attention would cause somebody to be hit? Yes. Or being hit when they were backing out of their driveway? Yes. Were there any intervening events? Yes. They could be argued that Mel's coming around the corner, traveling 5 miles an hour over the speed limit. These are all intervening events, but are they so unforeseen, superseding intervening events they would break Nigel's chain of causation? No. Damages: was Penny injured? Yes. We can super a lot of this argument for special damages, general damages from Otto and Mel down to Nigel. The defenses, again, very similar defenses concerning contributory negligence, that Penny contributed to her own harm by not paying more attention to wearing more visible uniforms when she's walking in a residential area during the evening. Number two, but Penny's going to argue that even if she had or had not, worn safety uniform while she was walking to be more visible during that time she was walking, the that Nigel had the last clear chance to pay more attention to backing up, and he did not take the proper course of conduct to avoid the accident in the first place. So he had that Penny could argue the last clear chance against Nigel. Also, too, if Penny is found at fault by the court for any type of or for her injury, I should say, found at fault for any degree of injury, or found at fault for any degree of her injury, she would have her recovery reduced by that degree of fault. And then if there's any argument that Nigel could make that Penny was aware of a risk, which it doesn't appear, and that she voluntarily assumed such risk regardless of the outcome, that would be a viable defense, but it doesn't look like that here. So in conclusion, it looks like Penny will be able to safely argue a negligence claim against Nigel. Now, we also want to make sure too that since we're dealing with three particular defendants, we don't want to forget to just contemplate: are we dealing with joint and several liability? And I just don't see that that's happening here. But I would just throw that in, and at the very tail end here, just better safe than sorry. Joint and several liability, throwing in the contribution indemnification, which I was going to say I don't think there's going to be indemnification, but there we go. There's going to be more likely contribution if Penny sues not Nigel for all the damages. He may be able to recover the amount that he overpaid per his degree of fault from Mel and Otto. Okay, and make sure to talk about that underneath the conclusion. This sounds like we did a great job here. Great going, team. And just wanted to say thank you so much for tuning in. I'm just going to come back up to the top here. Okay, I just want to say thank you so much for tuning in, and have a wonderful 4th of July. If I don't see you again on this channel and enjoy another essay with you, have a wonderful 4th of July, and God bless.